Okay, I am very pleased to have Dr. E. Michael Jones, all the way from the States, a prominent Catholic, I would say a hardliner Catholic, somebody who's trying to get back to the true teachings of Christianity. Do you like the word Christianity, or shall I just say Catholicism?
Let's say Catholicism to avoid confusion here.
Sure. So hardliner who wants to get back to the original teachings of his faith, and he's written a lot of books on things like how pornography is mind control, and also on the topic we're going to talk about, usury, which people might go like, what is usury? Um, I'll just say it's forbidden in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, and the whole Judaism thing we might get into, because but like when you find out what it is, you might say, what are we talking about? And that's why I want to play you this video to tell you how dangerous it is. I'll very briefly say what it is interest on loans. Now, when you hear that, you're going to go, oh, that's normal. Well, now it's normal. It's been normalized, but that's how we're going to talk about how the Jews have started to control us. Let's play this video to get you a bit of an understanding. It's only 30 seconds.
Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws. Meyer Amschel Rothschild. Throughout history, moneylenders have had the special ability to create money out of nothing. The concept of usury, or unfair interest on loans, has been condemned as immoral by many key figures throughout history. For example, Julius Caesar, Aristotle, Plato, Napoleon, and even a certain man with a unique mustache were all against usury. Stephen Goodson in his book explains that people who run this debt system have used their power throughout history to subvert governments, manufacture wars that produce vast profits, and topple regimes whose banking system was not under their control. Give me control.
So I'm just going to add a few words, or summarize a bit what's happening here. If you have money, you've got control. You can control. Everybody knows politicians are bought, but not only that, there are so many things you don't understand that usury does. One is it makes wars possible. Wars are incredibly expensive. Governments don't have the money for them, and banks have always been supplying the money on both sides of it, like World War One and Two, whatever. They've been paying for wars on both sides, right? And also they inflate the cost of everything. And this, from an Islamic point of view, is the Quran. I'll very briefly say, and I always give like a document of my references and things in the description below. Those who devour interest do not rise except as rises one who Satan has smitten with insanity. This is because they say trade is also like interest, where Allah, that is God, has made trade lawful and made interest unlawful. Very briefly, what it's saying is interest has a satanic power. Because sometimes people go like, who are these billionaires who are happy to destroy the world and then think they're going to hide out in a bunker? Like, that's insane. But it's that it has that satanic effect on people where they're willing to destroy the whole planet, kill loads of people as they have been. So I don't want to talk too much because I've got the esteemed Dr. E. Michael Jones. I want him to do most of the talking today. I'm not even going to, it's not a debate. I've just got a bunch of questions for him. So thank you very much. I think we're doing a monthly regular thing here, and I appreciate you coming again on my little live stream. How would you like to introduce yourself? But just a short version. What would you say?
Well, usury, yeah, you have to specify. It's based on compound interest. Compound interest is, you could say, satanic. Okay, there is a geometric progression here. It starts off kind of a flat line, and then it goes up like that. And once it hits that bend, it becomes unrepayable. All floating loans become unrepayable. And at that point, a moment of crisis steps in. So let me give specific examples. The Whigs created the Bank of England in 1692 to basically, they brought over William of Orange because he was a Protestant. They made him king, even though the Stuarts were the rightful heir. Why did he do that? Because Catholics would not honor usurious loans. They would not honor usury. They said these are not valid contracts. You could not depend on a Catholic king to support a usurious loan. That's why they brought him over here, because the Protestants by this point were going and accepted usury. The Catholic Church has never accepted usury. And to this day, it does not accept usury. The fundamental statement is Vix Pervenit, the encyclical by Pope Benedict XIV, 1745. Usury is always wrong. What does he mean by usury? Any interest. What he means is compound interest.
Yeah.
If you're talking about simple interest, it's a fee, and that's different. But compound interest is always immoral because of the nature of compound interest. So it gets out of control. So to stay with the Bank of England, 1792, they're going to lend King William money so he can fight France. That's what you just said it. Every army, you need an army, you gotta have to borrow money. They're going to do it. Fine, we'll lend you the money, and we, the Whigs, will be the beneficiary because it's a private bank. They own the bank. So they make out like bandits because King Billy wants to have a war with France. Everything's fine. Everything's great until you hit that inflection point. And that was 1763. The floating loan gets out of control at around 70 years. Okay, so suddenly Lord Townsend says, wait a minute, we can't pay this back. He calls in Adam Smith, the guy who wrote Wealth of Nations. What are we going to do? Can't pay it off. And Smith says, have the colonies pay it. Guess what happened? The colonies rebelled and they separated from England. That was the main thing driving the rebellion against England. They said to him, we're not going to pay off your loans because no one can pay off a floating loan after 60 years. This is exactly repeats itself over and over again in human history. This is why it's always wrong and always leads to a bad outcome, even though it seems reasonable at the beginning. So you say the same thing with the Catholics. The Catholics, the Habsburgs, they are the big family, Catholic family in Europe about the time, shortly around the time of the Reformation. 1492, they are the king of Spain, and they own the colonies in America, like Mexico, South America. They own every single gold and silver mine in the world, in America. And that money is flowing into their coffers. The only problem, you got English pirates who are stealing it along the way, but there's still a lot of money coming in. And what can go wrong? The Fugger family now is the papal, they are the family that lends money to the Habsburgs. They brag they never charge more than 5% or maybe 6%. Their first loan was in 1494, so 2 years after the discovery of America. The money, the gold and the silver is flowing into Spain. What happens? 1555, they go bankrupt. How can you go bankrupt when you own every gold and silver mine in the New World? The answer to that is compound interest. No amount of money in the world can pay off compound interest. That is the problem with it. That's why that's not the reason it's immoral, but that is one of the consequences that everybody has to learn about if you want to understand why usury will wreck your economy.
Cool. So let me try to summarize. One, usury enables wars and enables wars and even creates the greed. So like, even if you don't need a war, you can think, oh, I can pay for it. So it enables wars and pays for them. They're unpayable loans. Would you, I like to say it as a sort of from a British sort of perspective, Robin Hood, he used to rob the rich to pay for, to give money
Pay the poor.
right?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
the reverse Robin Hood, because the rich get richer and the
absolutely.
poor.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. If there's one thing that sucks money out of the economy of the broad mass of people and puts it into the hands of a small group of people, it's usury. You're exactly right. It concentrates wealth into smaller and smaller as it goes on. And it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and they get richer and richer and richer to the point where they can buy the government, which is the situation we're in right now in America.
Right. We've got more billionaires than ever, and more. The wealth gap is bigger than ever all around the world. And then a lot of people don't realize that they don't understand why things are so expensive. It literally causes inflation, because the more you get this free money, essentially, the more you can buy stuff. So houses are way more expensive than they used to. So I know in London, I have like an auntie, or my uncles and aunties bought a house in, I think, the 1960s for 5,000, and by the time it was 2000 and something, they sold it for $500,000, like 100 times more
All right.
expensive, just in London, right?
It's
I mean,
all right.
yeah, that's probably everywhere.
It's not direct, okay? Because interest, the inflation, there is a connection, but it's not direct. What happens over this period of time is that more and more disposable income has to go to interest payments. Okay, that becomes the first thing, because if you're in debt, you have to pay the interest first before you eat, because if you default on your loan, they will take your house or take your car, whatever it is. So you have to do that. So more and more of your money is going into payment of interest. You have less and less money to do other things with. Now, eventually the government's in the same situation. Okay, the government borrows money.
But isn't like
how is the government going to pay money? How is the government is in a bind? How are they going to pay for this? Well, they inflate the currency. That's exactly what they do. In order they print more money, because then they can pay it off. And then, but what happens is the money becomes debased. Now, this is doesn't matter whether it's paper money or whether it's gold money. This was the story of the Roman Empire. They had to debase the currency. And so you had what was supposed to be a silver coin. It was basically brass with a little bit of silver painted on it by the end. It wasn't working, because you cannot get out from under the usury burden by printing more money. They didn't print money back then.
Yeah, I think there's different ways in which inflation happens. Yes, money gets devalued because they keep printing money to pay off their debt. The government has to pay. But also, like, we've got, like in America, I heard this crazy thing of a 50-year mortgage, right, that they're introducing, right? That just makes it, and that enables people to borrow more money, even if they don't think about the future, so they can pay for more and more expensive houses. So I think it works in many ways.
Well, the point of a 50-year mortgage is that you have a low monthly payment. But the downside is you're going to pay 10 times what you would pay for a 10-year mortgage, or 5 times.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You're going in the long run, you're going to pay 10 times what the house is worth.
I'm definitely not recommending these mortgages. What I'm saying is it enables you to pay for really expensive houses that you couldn't otherwise. Or let's put it the other way, it increases the potential cost of the house. So you
Absolutely.
could go up, right?
That's the whole point.
Inflation in 100 different ways.
That's exactly the point. So if there's more money available, okay, the price of the house is going to go up, because people will be outbidding each other. The same thing happened to higher education in America. The original plan for higher education was the college graduate will earn $10,000 on average with a college degree. College tuition is $1,000 a year. So we will lend you the money, and the government will subsidize it and keep the interest very low, so that you will not. So you'll get it all back when you get the job. Well, as soon as you start borrowing money, the price of tuition goes up, because the college knows that we can charge whatever the market will bear, and you will borrow the money. So now after this was 1960. So now it's like 65 years later. Now the price of college, it used to be $1,000 a year. To give you some indication, when I was in college, if you got a good factory job, you could earn a year's college tuition by working 3 months in the factory in the summer. That means right now, for the same type of economy, you would have to earn $250,000 in 3 months on a summer job. That's the situation right now. And it's because borrowing, usury, has allowed the colleges to raise the price every single year, knowing that they have a captive audience that will pay it.
Great. And I mean, to give people hope, this is just, I said I was going to mainly ask you questions, but like I'm in, so maybe I didn't give a proper introduction. I'm a Muslim. I'm British, but I've moved to Jordan. England is incredibly expensive place to live. And I could buy a mansion for 50,000 here, like build it from scratch, $50,000, dinars, whatever. It's roughly the same. It's not roughly the same, but 100,000, I could like go crazy, right? And that's really cheap compared to anything you would have in the States or in England.
Right.
And that's because we don't really have too much interest here. It is taking root, and people are abusing the system, but they don't use it to buy houses, as far as I can tell. So it's relatively cheap, and that's kind of light at the end of the tunnel. If we can get rid of usury, life can be incredibly cheap. There are so many people complaining that they don't feel they can raise a family because it's just too expensive. There's no space, there's no housing, no nothing. And so, yeah. So my first question was going to be, is usury lending money on interest bad? If so, how? I think we've covered the main points on that. My second question to you, I say Christians, maybe I'll keep it to Catholics. Catholics believed usury was wrong. Do they still believe that?
Yes. I was in the middle of writing my book, Barren Metal: A History of Capitalism as the Conflict Between Labor and Usury. And I asked the premier Catholic moral theologian in the world, I said, is Vix Pervenit still the definitive church teaching? He said, yes, it will never change. It's like, are we going to change the teaching on adultery? Are we going to change the teaching on murder? You cannot change the teaching because usury is intrinsically immoral. If two people come together to do a business transaction, the stronger is always going to be tempted to take advantage of the weaker. That's why economics is is part of moral philosophy. Usury is always the stronger taking advantage of the weaker. There is no shared risk in a loan. That is why the loan is immoral. If you share risk, if you invest stock in your stock, okay, the company has a bad year, you don't get a dividend. If you miss one payment with usury, you lose the farm, you lose the house, and it goes right into the hands of the usurers. This is why it's intrinsically immoral, and it will never change.
Great. So what you're saying, like the Islamic idea is lending money and interest should be replaced with investment, which is a two-way risk rather than a one-sided. Yeah.
That's exactly the point. If you share the risk, you have a right to a return on your investment. If you do not share the risk, you have no right for a return.
Great. And just to maybe further this point or further the question, like, is usury still wrong according to Catholicism? It might sound strange to many people that it's against the teachings of the Bible when very few people know about it. Can you kind of expand on what's happening there? Why does next to nobody know that usury is bad? I would say I don't want to say Catholics, Christians. Most people I know who think they follow the Bible don't realize that there's anything wrong with usury or borrowing money and interest.
All right. Yeah. It's a historical process. So basically, in the middle, you had the beginning of the money economy, let's say the 15th century, 14th century in Italy. It's the beginning of money economy. Before you owed labor to your Lord, and it was figured in days, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, something like that. Now the Lord wants money. Where are you going to get the money? Who has the money? The Jews have the money, because it's immoral for a Christian to take usury. They tolerate the Jews, okay? The Jews average, if you're lucky, you will get borrow at 43 1/3% interest. That's the loan. So as this becomes apparent that the people are losing whatever they have because they need to come up for money to pay taxes, they have to borrow from the Jew. You'll never be able to get out of a loan that charges 43 1/3%. It's causing unrest, civil unrest. And so the church steps in and they create something called the Monte di Pietà in Italy, Florence in particular, which is a pawn shop for poor people. Okay. And so you go to the pawn shop and they will charge you a 5% fee rather than 43 1/3% compound interest. And then the church gets into a big argument. Okay. Is it a fee? Is it usury? It goes back and forth, back and forth. There's a kind of crisis. But in the meantime, the prince, okay, now let me tell you the deal here is, the Franciscans will come into your city. We will erect a Monte di Pietà, but there's one other condition. You have to kick out the Jews. You have to expel the Jews, because the Jews are paying 20%. So there's a cardinal or the prince who has money. He can give it to the Jew and get a 20% return on his investment. And the Jew will still make out because he's charging everyone else 43 1/3%. This is going to say the prince is always the weakest link in the chain here, because he always needs money, because he can't control his expenses. And sometimes a war breaks out. I need money immediately to fight the war. I don't care what the interest rate is. I got to save the country, that type of thing. And that's how the Jews got their foothold in this economy. Okay. And that's why the church could never break completely with the whole issue of usury. The Catholic cardinals themselves were taking money secretly to the Jews because they get a 20% return on their investments. They were undermining the work of the Franciscans, who's trying to kick the Jews out and will charge them fee. And that way they won't be burdened. The working class won't be burdened with usury.
Okay, cool. So that gets to the next question, which is, do Jews control us with usury?
Yes. So we can deal with that historically. Okay. So in the 13th century in England, the Jews are there. Okay. And they're lending money. And everybody's getting into debt, unrepayable debt, which means you keep paying, and the Jew keeps telling you, no, you keep paying more. Well, I paid back the principal. That doesn't matter. You signed a contract. This is that type of thing. So the difference then is everybody knows where the Jew lives. And so what you're going to do is you're going to have a mob of people. They're going to burn the Jew's house down because his records are in the house, and that will free you from usury. And maybe we'll kill the Jew at the same time. And so the king, in order to keep this from becoming a total revolution, he kicks the Jews out. That's what the king of England did in 1290, kicked the Jews out, okay? But the same problem keeps coming back again, okay? The prince always needs money, okay? So he's always coming back. It's always through some type of back door. Now, the big break came with the Reformation, when the Calvinists basically accepted usury. Luther never accepted usury. Calvin was from Geneva. Geneva's a banking town. So Calvinism then became the vehicle for basically Christian Jews, Cohorzans, whatever they were called. They were basically Christians that acted like Jews because they took interest on loans. And then that is where capitalism began. Began in Holland, around the, right around the beginning of this, where the first bank was, the exchange bank, the Wisselbank, early 1600s. This is where now you've got a state supporting usury. What is capitalism? Capitalism is state-sponsored usury.
Really? Is that your definition? I thought capitalism is just trading goods
No,
and the
that's
idea
not.
that you can have private property.
No, absolutely not.
Really?
It's not my definition. It is Heinrich Pesch, the great German economist, Heinrich Pesch, the Jesuit. Capitalism is state sponsored usury. There was always usury, but the state never sponsored it. Okay, now with capitalism, the state will guarantee usurious contracts which the Catholics never did before.
What do you call the right to trade private property? Just so essentially not communism. What do you call that when you're like if you don't want to indulge in usury, but you still want to trade things? I would normally call that capitalism.
No.
What would you call that?
Well, you can call it whatever you want, but I mean, you're going to
Okay.
run into problems. You're going to make category mistakes here. There is
Okay.
nothing wrong with the ownership of property. There
Great.
is
Yeah, I agree.
nothing. There is. I mean, Proudhon by the end of the 19th century, when capitalism got so bad, Proudhon would say property is theft. The Catholic Church has never said property is theft. If
Hmm.
you are the head of a family, you have to own property to support your family. There is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with commerce. There is nothing wrong with trade. God intended trade. Because if you live in Iceland and you want wine, you're going to have a hard time growing grapes in Iceland, but it's easy to catch cod. If you're in Portugal, it's easy to create wine and you don't have cod. So that's why God intended trade. There's nothing wrong with trade. There's nothing wrong with capital per se. There's nothing wrong with ownership of property. The reason we feel that way is because of communism. The influence of communism, where Karl Marx says capitalism is evil. Capital is evil. No, capital is not evil.
So
Usury is
just
evil.
so
He,
just to
he,
be
he
clear,
could,
Muslims, Catholics, we're happy with trade. It's just because some people might think when you say capitalism, you're against trade. That's really clear. We're pro trade. Even this verse of the Quran that I quoted says it makes that distinction that interest is not trade. They're different things. Cool. Okay.
Saint Bernardino of Siena, right around the time when capitalism was getting started, he said, usury destroys charity and it destroys business.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the Quran actually prefaces the point about stopping interest by talking about charity first, because of this is selfish, satanic attitude that interest creates. It creates
Yeah,
greed. It creates greed on everybody, even the poor.
absolutely.
They think they can have more
Absolutely.
by borrowing from their
Look,
future, essentially.
Look,
Yeah.
if you want to talk about Satanism, the Faust myth came into existence right around the same time as the money economy in Germany. And Faust, this is the story. If you know the story, this is a man who sells his soul to the devil. That's like the loan. Okay, you borrow money and you can do anything. You're going to have sex with Helen of Troy. This is all in Faust. You know what I mean? And then suddenly, well, wait a minute, the devil shows up and he wants your soul. This is like the loan coming due. You had all that money, but now you have to pay it back with interest and you can't pay it back. So he takes your soul. This is happening right around the same time as the rise of the money economy in Europe. That's why it's the author of that understood that it was satanic.
Yeah. I mean, just to kind of labor the point, maybe um, there was there's a increasingly popular podcast. I don't know how to describe them. American Chinese people, and they're talking about influence of Jews, and they talked about usury, and that got banned. Their video got banned, or whatever you call it. It tells you how important this topic is. The people
You're
who
right.
control us don't want us to talk about usury. They
Yeah,
want it to be normalized as if it's just how the economy should be run. They want you to think that so that you don't think of an alternative. I mean, maybe if you want to say something on that, I could just kind of just show. I mean, I'm not going to run the whole what's it called, the whole podcast, because it's about an hour long, and some people might recognize. Where has it gone? Okay, because I keep a record of all this stuff. But somehow I can't find it. Maybe I'm not supposed to find it. But anyway, so yes, it's an important topic. Basically, they started in this particular podcast by talking about that Jews don't lend each other interest because it's against their teachings, right? But they think it's okay to. And by the way, I should say I'm not. Definitely, I've got Jewish friends. The next live stream I'm going to do is with a Jewish guy in America, and I'm going to ask him the same question. Yeah, I'm not, saying kill Jews or anything bad. Just saying what's happening.
No. But you have to make a distinction between the Jews and all Jews. The Jews are the political entity that projects Jewish power onto the world. The engine behind that is usury. That is the main engine behind Jewish power. That is how they can project their power so effectively. Because what happened in America is they basically bought up the entire Congress through IPAC. There are basically 2 people in the Congress of the United States of America who did not take IPAC money. This is where it comes from. And it's compounded by gambling. Gambling is another source of Jewish income where they take the money in and then they lend it out at interest after you take it in through gambling. You can't underestimate the power of gambling and usury in American politics.
Wow, we've got to talk about that because, again, Islam's dead against gambling. And all my shows are basically about helping the ordinary person take control of their lives, make their lives better. So that's definitely a really important topic. Like, all I'm doing in my collaboration with you basically is highlighting things that our faith, or I didn't actually realize gambling was against Catholicism or Christianity.
The Catholic Church has a nuanced position on gambling. So if you have money, like you don't really matter, a small amount of money, and you want to bet it on horse races, as long as it doesn't affect your family, it's fine. Okay, as long as it doesn't affect that, it's not an absolute prohibition. The United States law was, in a sense, much stricter than the Catholic Church. Gambling was illegal everywhere, and what you saw with the rise of Jewish power in America is casinos all over the place. The first casino, I remember when it happened. It was in first of all, the first local casino. Las Vegas was a Jewish creation. The Jews created Las Vegas. Meyer Lansky created Las Vegas. No question about it. Gambling was always illegal, and the Jews got involved in it at the same time that alcohol was illegal. So they would have casinos outside of town called Sin City, where you could engage in prostitution, gambling, and alcohol when it was illegal. That's how they started to make their money. These are the people, Meyer Lansky, Mo Dalitz, Jews like that, are the people that created Las Vegas. The first time outside of Las Vegas, it was Atlantic City. I was there when it happened. I'm only a few miles away from Atlantic City. It was the Meyer Lansky's casino that was the first casino. It was called Resorts, but it goes back to Meyer Lansky money.
Okay.
Now they're all over the place.
So, yeah, we've got to talk about, how not just pornography is mind control, but how cheap sex destroys families, society, etc. And maybe that's the plan. That's a really important topic at some point. And gambling. I didn't realize gambling was against Christianity or Catholicism, so that's great to know. And we've got to talk about that because I would dispute that we should have any sort of gambling because it's addictive, but we should talk about that at some point. But just I can't seem to display this full video. I did it a second ago. I put it in big, but basically these guys who are getting pretty popular were cancelled for talking about usury. So there's there's definitely worry that this will get out, that usury is a bad thing. And then my next question is, how can business, so we've got to have solutions rather than just saying usury is bad, we've got to have solutions. So how can businesses get money without usury? What's your opinion?
Selling stock. You take stock in your company. You buy stock in a company. You're sharing risk. That's a legitimate way of you investing your money and getting a return, and it's a legitimate way for the company to get money to finance capital improvement. Very simple.
Totally agree. Yeah, investment of one kind or another. So selling stock is a form of investment because they get something back from it. Maybe there's other forms, but yeah,
Both parties benefit.
yeah,
The company gets capital, the lender gets, or the buyer of stock gets a return on his investment.
great. So the next question is, if Jews have control over money and have bought politicians with it, how can we regain control of our countries?
You have to expropriate the money. You have to take the money from the Jews. It's that simple. Now, you can do it by taxation. What happened during the Reagan-Thatcher era is that they basically stopped taxing rich people. There used to be, you had a 90% income tax on people with earning $1 million a year. That effectively limited the effect of usury. This goes all the way back to the fundamental principles of the Catholic Church. So Princess Margaret of Brabant wrote to St. Thomas Aquinas, the great scholastic thinker, and she said, how do I deal with the Jews? They're here. That's Holland now. This was a stronghold Jewish. They're lending money. How do I deal with the fact that they have acquired all this money and they're concentrating wealth in their hands? And this is a saint of the Catholic Church, the premier Catholic theologian of the Catholic Church. Okay, he said, take the money from the Jews. You have to appropriate that money. You have to take the money from the Jews and you have to give it to the poor because you can't really give it back. What is theft? Usury is theft. So when you confess the sin of theft, you have to make restitution. But by this point, nobody knows where that money came from. So you take the money from the Jews and you give it to the poor, and that will solve the usury problem.
So your solution is to, you can say, steal it back, or you don't want to use the word steal.
Theft. This is
Sure.
not theft. If you apprehend a burglar and you go into his house and he's got all of the stuff in the basement that he stole from other people, so when the state takes that, that's not theft. That is expropriating something from the expropriator, to use Marxist terminology. He has no right. That thief has no right to that property. And so therefore you are not committing the sin of theft by taking it from him.
Can I suggest some alternatives, which I think are already working in some ways, right? So one is, you don't get it yourself. You, as an individual, you limit your use of borrowing money on credit cards. So you try to keep out of the system, and then you don't pay it. You don't increase their wealth.
Okay.
And
now,
yeah,
I would say credit card is now a form of money. You can use the credit card as long as you pay it off, everything on your bill at the end of the month. That's not usury. That's money. Okay. The corollary to this is never borrow money on a credit card. Never. Don't ever do that, because the interest rate is always usurious. So you can use it as money as long as you pay it off at the end of the month. There's some things you can't go to a gas station now and buy gas unless you have a credit card. So it's basically this is a form of money, which you have to use. It is not usurious.
I don't have a credit card. I have a debit card. I try to avoid being minors, because you're essentially borrowing money that you might have to pay interest on,
They
and
know
that's a big,
that. There's a gamble
yeah,
here. They are going to say the average guy is not going to be able to keep a count of how much money he's borrowing. He will slip
exactly.
into debt, and once he slips into debt, we have him, and he'll never
Yeah,
get out of it. That's why it's dangerous. I'm not saying it's dangerous, but
yeah. Okay.
if you are scrupulous about using it and paying it back by the end of the month, it's money, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. I mean, I just have my doubts about that because I can't remember the statistics, but a lot of people can't pay. They eventually default on their loans. So they
I agree.
have,
I agree with you. It's dangerous. I'm not saying it isn't
okay.
dangerous. It is dangerous.
Cool. Okay. So one way is to try to keep out of the system as much as possible by being patient. Have you ever heard of what people might describe as the Wurgel experiment? It's an Austrian town after um, the Great Depression, and they essentially created their own money. They created stamps, and they very quickly became rich by implementing some important rules. No interest, but instead the inverse of interest, a wealth tax. Anybody who hoards money or has unspent money, they pay tax on that. That's exactly the Islamic system. We call it zakat, which is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And you don't get taxed on how much you earn, it's how much you don't use. So only the wealthy get taxed, basically. What do you think about that kind of idea?
That's true. That's what the system we had. Basically, you had a graduated income tax where the poor do not pay an income tax, but that has gone down. And then you graduate it by saying the rich have to pay a much higher tax because the poor have to spend 99% of their money on necessities. When you get to the rich, what do they spend? A fraction of 1% on necessities, and everything else is just play money that they can make themselves richer. So you have a right, the government has a right to tax them at like 90%. That's what it was in the United States of America before Reagan Thatcher. That was a crucial turning point in recent American history. The Fed was paying 20% on T-bills in 1980. You can
How?
this will ruin my son was working on Wall Street in 1980 and making cold calls. No one will buy stock where you have to risk your money if the government is going to pay you 20%. It killed business. It's what I said, what San Bernardino said. It killed business. And they were go ahead.
Yeah, so you're talking about progressive tax where the poor pay a little bit of tax and the rich pay a lot of tax. Um, but the Islamic system is you actually pay very little tax, only like 2.5% called zakat on your unspent wealth after a year. The reason why I'm pointing this out is what we want, I think we agree on to how do we replace interest-based loans is investment. Who's going to invest? The rich. If we tax them 90%, they're not going to have any money. What do you think about that? So we should have a low tax, not a progressive tax, a
No,
wealth tax, completely different.
their money will become part of the middle class money. Their money will descend. Now, the problem you've got bad government too, but basically the government, because the rich are paying 90%, the poor should not pay any tax at all. That's redistribution of wealth.
Sure.
That's a government that is for the people would institute that type of progressive income tax. What happened with
A lot of
Reagan?
people say, but a lot of people say governments are really bad at ever doing anything right. They historically they can't manage money.
This is libertarian bullshit. Libertarianism was created by Jews to justify Jewish usury. What's the one? His name fails me. The Austrian school. The Austrian school is Jews creating an economy that benefits rich Jews. This is all bullshit.
Okay. And where are we so far? So some people say that usury is part of business. What is your argument against that? Maybe you've covered that already.
Yeah, it destroys business. It
Yeah.
destroys business. Why would anybody who could get 20% risk-free invest in any business? It destroys business. The people who need the loans, where a stockholder could supply them with capital, they can't get loans because no one will invest in stock if you get a guaranteed 20% return from usury, which is
Mm.
exactly the situation under Paul Volcker in the United States of America in 1980. It killed
Yeah.
business, kills charity, kills business.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's good. I mean, kills charity because it makes you greedy rather than want to give money, and it creates bad intentions. Like you give a loan, and you're really happy if they can't pay it back because you get whatever
You get
they
the collateral. You want to get
collateral.
whatever they
Yeah,
put up as collateral.
great. Wow, we got through the questions faster than I thought, and I've got a final kind of general question. Any other thoughts about usury?
Well, yeah, the question is, how do you put the bell on the cat? That's the
Mm,
question. We know it's wrong. We, Muslims and Catholics, know it's wrong. We have been crippled by, Catholics have been crippled by the American empire. That is precisely the problem here. And the crucial turning point was after World War II with the anti-communist crusade. We're against communism. Catholics do not like communism. Yes, we're going to fight with America on our side, and we will defeat communism. And the culmination of this was Pope John Paul II and Ronald Reagan, when Catholics thought everything's this is the perfect universe. America, Catholic Church, shoulder to shoulder. Well, no, they were incompatible, and the church got hornswoggled. They got sucked into a bad deal, and now we're waking up to it. Okay. Oh, it was all going to be. Now we got all these wars, all the wars against Islam. Okay. We got all of these people, Catholics included, who are paid to attack Muslims as the problem, paid by Jews. And I'm saying this is the moment for the Catholic Muslim alliance, because we just spent a whole hour showing that we have something in common here when it comes to usury. There's a new world now because of the Mamdani election in New York. That proves that a Muslim can get elected to political office in the United States. And it proves that there is the possibility of a Muslim Catholic alliance because we share a common enemy. The Jews are the enemy. They are the people. This is St. Paul. This is not E. Michael Jones. The Jews are the people who killed Christ, and they are enemies of the entire human race. And now they have proven it. You don't have to be a Catholic to believe it now. All you have to do is look at what happened in Gaza, and you realize that there is a group of people there who feel they are above every law, and they can kill you if they don't like you. And we have
okay,
to
this
stop
is
that.
so the part of the okay. This alliance for me is to get people back to God and godly values and godly rules. And you said something that I'm concerned about. You said we need to make clear. What did you just say? It was something like we need to make people aware of the rules. Essentially, I can't remember how you phrased it. My problem is that the way Christianity or Catholicism has been taught for a long time is this idea that there are no rules, that the Old Testament is for the past, and a lot of Christians, and I'm not sure to what extent Catholics say this, you don't have to worry about the law because St. Paul says the law is a curse. Um, you just have to listen to the Holy Spirit within yourself, and somehow you know that. Is that a Catholic teaching? Is it anti the biblical teachings or the law? Where do you
There's a
stand on
certain
that?
the Hebrew law, the Mosaic covenant, those laws, 660 laws
Mm,
regulating things like dietary things and all that, that's gone. That's obsolete. It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't mean there's no such thing as law, okay? Positive law, natural law is what I'm talking about here. If you want to understand the basis of the Catholic faith, it's the Gospel of St. John. In the beginning, there was logos. There was reason. There has never been, logos is with God. Logos is God. God is reasonable. And that reason has been written on your heart. The reason, a practical reason, is known as morality. And that's written on your heart. And you don't have to be a Muslim, you don't have to be a Hindu to know that there are some things are right and some things are wrong. And I'm saying this was the basis of a successful America, where basically you had all of these Protestant sects coming from England. They're all crazy. They can't talk to each other. And so we're not going to talk to them anymore. We're not going to have an established church, but we have to have a moral consensus, because that is how you act. And I'm saying,
Yes.
if we can come up with a moral consensus and understand that we have a common enemy and that we worship the same God, we have the basis for a political coalition. I'm not going to deal. I just was on with a Muslim from New Jersey, forget his name. First, before I got on, he's talking about riba. He's talking about usury. Is this a usurious contract? Okay, that's fine. That's called casuistry. Okay, you have to do that. That's fine. If in America, you have the right to have your own religion and deal with those things, as long as you stay within the moral consensus. Who broke the moral consensus? Who is the one that overturned the laws on obscenity, on pornography, on usury, on abortion? It's one group of people, and that was the Jews who did it. And they wrecked America by doing it. And there's only one way back now. We have to go back to the moral law, because now they have the right to kill you if they don't like you. They have the right to deplatform you.
So how do you get this moral consensus? Do you read it in the Bible? Because this is the thing that, from a Muslim perspective, I think Christianity or Catholicism, whatever, has to get back to. It has to be black and white. Because if you know black and white, this is wrong, usury is wrong, gambling is wrong, whatever, at least you know the red lines. Do you know what I mean? Like, even Muslims, they might borrow money on interest, but they know it's wrong. You can ask every Muslim, they know it's wrong. And you've got to start from that. That's my perspective. If we want to be successful in this sort of alliance and making the world a better place, to saving the West from usury and things like that, it has to be black and white. It has to be clear.
Okay.
Where do they get these rules from?
Have you heard of Moses?
Yeah.
He had 10 commandments.
Yeah.
God wrote those 10 commandments for Moses. Do you accept those 10 commandments?
I think I do. I have to check them, but I'm quite sure I do. Yeah.
That's black and white. Okay,
Yeah.
I can give it to you in black and white. That is black and white. Every courthouse in the United States of America had the 10 commandments, the 2 tablets outside of that courthouse, because they understood that this is the basis of the laws of the United States of America. The moral law is the basis for civil law. As soon as you break with the moral law, which is what happened with abortion, which is what happened with usury, because the Jews said it's okay, you lose that moral consensus, and then it comes down to who has the most money. As soon as you destroy the moral order, the new order is who has the most money. $1, 1 vote. That's the world we live in right now in the United States of America.
Cool.
We have to go back to the moral law.
So that's great. So the 10 commandments don't include usury. So should we look elsewhere as well for
Yes, they
other...
do. It does.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not steal.
Okay.
Usury is a form of theft. Obviously, the world is a complicated place. That's why this guy was going through the casuistry. There are Muslims there. Is this a usurious contract? Suppose I do this, that, and the other thing. So obviously, Pope said the same thing. Pope Benedict XIV said, look, usury is always wrong. Now, the economic system has gotten so complicated, I, as Pope, cannot pronounce on every single contract. You're going to have to go to your spiritual advisor and say, this is what I'm doing, and you tell me whether it's usury or not. But it all goes back to that fundamental statement of thou shalt not steal. You're
Yeah.
stealing from someone when you when you lure him in to a usurious contract.
Great. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I'm glad, Dr. E. Michael Jones, that you have highlighted, and we've discussed this, like the dangers of usury, and that it is totally against the teachings of Catholicism or Christianity, whatever you want to call it, or biblical
No,
teachings.
let's not talk about Christianity, because I
Okay,
can't.
I won't mention that word.
There are 30,000 Protestant sects. Okay, they
Well, I say
all
biblical
they're-
teachings, against biblical teachings.
we were talking about the law. The moral law is written on your heart. Okay, but to reinforce that, God gave it to Moses on a tablet, written on a tablet, and that's the basis for the moral law. And I think that's the basis for our collaboration against a group of people who feel they are above any law. Basil Smotrich said that Jews do not have to follow international law because they are God's chosen people. That is antithetical to any type of world peace. As soon as you get a group like that.
Yeah. I mean, just to summarize my position, it is to follow God's laws so that you don't become victim of any power. Because the Jews weren't always powerful. It's when we stopped following God's laws that we became weak. Would you
Absolutely.
agree?
You're absolutely
Cool.
right. And they know that. And that's why I said sexual liberation is a form of political control. They know you lose your power the minute you stop being moral. Morality is rationality.
Yeah. Yeah. Morality brings happiness. It's rational. It's good for you in the long term. Great. Thank you so much, Dr. E. Michael Jones. I really appreciate your time. I think a lot of your fans enjoy our collaboration. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully another show
Sure. Be
next
happy.
month, probably along the time. Another topic, maybe gambling or the dangers of free sex or something along those lines. I'll email you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you
My
very much.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Salam.
Salam.